Okay, ready to roll whenever you are, Ms. Hall.
Okay. Seeing the presence of a quorum, I'll call to order this meeting of the Pelham School Committee at 6:30, and we'll start with roll call attendance. Brenda.
Brenda, present.
Sarah Best.
Sarah Best, present.
Margaret.
Margaret, present.
Ron.
Menino, present.
And Hall, present. Okay. All right, first up is the approval of the minutes. So we have the minutes from January 14th and February 11th. So we can start with January 14th. Any questions, comments, edits on those minutes? Okay. I move to approve the minutes of January 14th, 2021. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Roll call vote. Brenda.
Brenda, aye.
Sarah Best.
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't there.
Okay. Margaret.
Margaret, aye.
Ron.
Ron, aye.
And Hall, aye. Okay. And then next up are the February 11th minutes. I just had one change to those in 5D. There's two references to eliminating the preschool. Mr. Menino thought we were planning on eliminating it because of the expense. Ms. Hall thought we were eliminating. there was no talk about eliminating it. I think if we could just maybe update that to, not opening it for that year. Cause I don't think, Ron, that's what you were asking. And I certainly was not.
That's right.
Okay. All right. That was my only change. Did anyone else have? Yeah, Sarah Best.
I just have, so in 5A, I think it's just a spelling typo. I think it says queen, but I think it's supposed to say queer. Under the Let's Talk. So focus of Let's Talk curriculum and anti-racist perspective, queen
yes.
and trans. So I think it's supposed to be queer. And then Mira's last name is spelled correctly the first time, but then I think it's misspelled again.
Oh,
it's misspelled in the second paragraph somewhere.
Yes, the fourth line of that second paragraph. It says yep. Oh, okay.
And then in F, we were talking about the capital plan. It says, Ms. Kenny asked about the changing of the infrastructure for the Wi-Fi. The changing circumstances are depending on the infrastructure in the building, which will continue to go on openly. But that it was about that changes had to happen in Amherst first before changes can happen in Pelham.
Oh, yes. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm just noticing another thing as we talk, just the letters are out of order. A, B, C, F, D, E, G, H. So if we could just update the letters too. Anything else?
That's all I had.
Right. Excellent catches. All right. Is there a motion on the February 11th minutes?
I move to approve the.
You muted.
Sorry.
Oh, there you go.
I move to approve the minutes of February 11th.
All right. Second. All right. We'll do a roll call vote. Brenda.
Brenda, aye.
Sarah Best.
Kenny, aye.
Margaret.
Margaret, aye.
Ron.
Ron, aye.
And Hall, aye. Okay. Next up is public comment. We had one public comment that Mike will bring up. Thank you. And that individual also wrote to clarify that the preschool she referenced that was closing actually decided to stay open for another year. I forget the name of it now. So
Gorse.
she wants to clarify.
It's
What's
the
that?
It's called the Gorse Child Care Center. It's on the campus of
okay.
Mount Holyoke College. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. So they did decide to stay open for another year. She just wanted that corrected for the record. Yeah, Ron.
I'd just like to say I love this format because I can enlarge the comments and actually read them. I can't read them on the other platform, but this one you can make it so it's totally readable. I appreciate that.
Oh, all right, good. And Sarah Bess, you pointed out that we might have skipped minutes. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think they're just
Right.
misdated because if you read down them, they're actually from March 1st.
They are from that. Okay. All right.
Sorry.
No. Oh, don't apologize. Okay. Well, we'll just go over those next time. I saw the heading and I just didn't even read them. So we can approve them next month. Okay. Thank you for catching that. Okay. Next up is FY22 budget vote.
And so I'm going to bring Doug in here. I'm going to share just a couple pieces of information. I think we omitted to have superintendent principal updates tonight, but actually a lot of it weaves into this topic. So I'll preview just a couple of things, and Dr. Slow will talk about primarily just one change, positive change in our budget, and then we'll be available for questions. Since we already had a budget hearing, we're not going to belabor the parts, but some things got a little bit better, and we want to speak to those. But one of the things that we want to share that is also good news is that we now have 18 new school choice applications for the next school year. So that's really important. We have 12 in kindergarten, 1 in 2nd grade, 2 in 4th grade, 2 in 5th grade, and 1 for 6th grade for next year. Again, we don't know how many kindergartens we'll get, so we don't know if we'll be able to accept all 12 of the folks who applied for that. But at the same time, that's really good news, and kudos to Principal Whiting-Jones, who's at a PTO meeting, which is why she's not here tonight, for facilitating and doing a lot of outreach. So that's really important. And, and they continue generally to come throughout the spring. So hopefully that number increases, particularly the non-kindergarten number, because at some point we can't have a full kindergarten of just choice students. As nice as that would be for our budget, we do actually have Pelham students who attend the school as well. So we want to make sure that they get dibs on the seats. But that's a really good piece of budget news. Another good piece of budget news that it's about this year's budget. It certainly has an impact because these things are related, is that the rental of the gym was highly successful this spring. So it was rented since December, and particularly since January, pretty much 5 afternoons and evenings a week. And our estimate, I think Dr. Slaughter will correct me, but I think is roughly in the neighborhood of $12,000 that eventually, when all bills are paid, will come in. So that was really helping us out in this fiscal year. And that obviously, because of our choice fund, will help us out in the next fiscal year. So that's how I'm justifying that in terms of meeting law, that we're able to talk about that, because otherwise we were talking about pulling more from choice, which would influence next year's budget. So, I think, was there one other? No, I think that's the 2 budget good news pieces that I have, and Doug's going to share a third good news budget piece, and then I will, of course, end with a less good news budget piece about grants and federal government and things that are going to be voted in tomorrow, probably, or signed into law tomorrow by our president. So, Doug, do you want to do the third piece of good news and about what's different in this year's budget, particularly the ads cuts, as it relates to the last time we were here at the budget hearing?
Right. So I'm going to, do I have the option to share? I do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it works the same way as Google Meet.
Okay. Screen. Share screen. Okay. To say. Oh, I have to select which one. All right. Yes. Okay. Sorry, it took a moment to select the right thing. So I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit. Hopefully that'll make it a little bit more readable. The short story is that we've got some good news relative to our health insurance. And so we're going to have what is called a premium holiday, which basically means we don't pay, nor do our employees pay for their health insurance premiums for 1 month. And what that allows us to do is to essentially bring back about $25,000 of cuts we would have to make. It's a one-time savings, but it does provide relief to our budget, and that then results in fewer reductions that you see in the lower part of the screen. And so previously we were looking at one more reduction of a significant amount, a personnel kind of reduction. And so we were able to eliminate that. And while we still have to make reductions here, that's a much better circumstance relative to what we were thinking we were going to be dealing with. So that bit of good news is the reduction due to health insurance. Sometimes we get asked, why is it a premium holiday as opposed to just a reduction in rates that they spread out over the whole year? That's a bit of it's an odd question that we ask the health insurance folks. They think of the rates as being one thing; it's a structural thing, and then they think of the premium holiday as a correction to their balance. They carry a balance of funds, and when it gets too high, they will offer a premium holiday to reduce our burden. So we've had lower claims than expected, and so that allows us to get this premium holiday, which will help our budget in the coming year. So I think that's the bit of good news there, and so it means the amount of cuts we have to make is, as you see here, about 46,000 relative to our total increase in our budget, and so that will keep us on track with the guidance we got from your finance committee relative to the tax support that's available. We've got the rural REAP grant, which has been one we've had over years. It was missing for a couple of years. It's come back to help us out. Those are all positive bits of news that help support the budget as we move forward. So I think I'll pause there and see if there's questions.
And just to be succinct, about it, it was able to restore, the paraeducator position that was originally on here. There used to be 3 positions cut. There was these 2 part-time positions and a full-time position. And so our number of FTE that we would be reducing by went from 1.47 to 0.47. So that's going to be really helpful for the school and supporting our students, particularly in a time period that's particularly challenging next year. As students, they'll get in the spring. Most of them will get in the spring, but they've been out of school for a full year, and having more adults and more support for students who may not have been as successful accessing distance learning was really critical. So that's the restoration that you don't see on this cuts list that you did the last time around.
Doug, would you mind not sharing for just a sec so I can see if anyone has questions? All right.
I was just gonna.
Any questions? Yeah, Ron.
I'm a little confused. I thought the last time you showed this, there was a $46,000 cut. Now, is this a $46,000 cut or a $21,000 cut?
So it's a little bit of both in some respects.
So you can present, and I can get a view using this where Sarah can still see everybody, but the majority of the screen is your.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I didn't do that before just to make it a little easier to read, but I think at this point, that way you can reference it. So if you're able to share your screen again, there you are. And then, at least everyone should be able to see each other a bit on the left side.
Yep. Okay. Thanks. So
what happens is, because it's what we have is a reduction here in the top part of the screen. So it reduces our costs, which lowers our overall operating budget by that 25,000. That helps the overall sort of expense line to be smaller, which is what we needed. What we have in this lower section with this reductions are that's the actual cuts that you think of as far as personnel changes, that sort of thing. The premium holiday is a reduction in our cost, but it's not a cut in the same way. There's no loss of service or change in what's being made available to the students with that, or it doesn't add to what the students get, but it does reduce our cost. Whereas the lower the actual changes in staffing do change what and how we interact with our students a little bit.
Okay, let me ask the question another way. I'm optimistic. If for some reason a pot of money dropped from the sky over the next few months, how much extra revenue would we have to be able to offer the same services next year as we did this year at the Pelham School?
In that circumstance, if some lottery winner wanted to give us some money, the 21,000 would restore all of the staffing and service levels that we have currently. That would be a truly level services from the standpoint of what's happening in the classroom and the building.
That was my question. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, Sarah Ness?
Just to follow up on that, but that wouldn't do anything for next year. Next year, we'll still be looking at that $25,000 reduction, correct? Because that holiday is a one-time
That's
thing
correct.
for this year only.
That's
so for
correct.
next year, we would need a magic pot of gold that had $46,000 in it.
That's right. If we receive 21,000 this year, it would meaning fiscal 22, the coming school year.
Yes.
We'd be level services, and then for fiscal 23. So when we're a year from now and we're talking about the budget for fiscal 23, that 25,000 is going to be an issue for us. Next year
For our future selves.
Right.
Future Doug can
Right.
work on that problem.
We have changes in our health insurance coverage that save us money. There may be other things that happen that, in a similar way where we have a cost reduction, but it may also require us to make some hard choices. But if we get, 18 school choice students to the group that we have now, that school choice may fill that 25,000.
Great.
So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Okay, thank you.
Brenda, go ahead.
Could school choice dollars fill the 21,000 for the library paraeducator and the music staff for next year?
Technically, yes, although I don't think we would want to suggest that as an appropriate action. The balance we have, actually with 225, given the estimates we were making at the time, would be utilizing money that we would be receiving during next fiscal year. So the state of our balances for school choice are such that 225 is just a little more than essentially what we have in the bank, and so we tend to try to sort of use fully savings to fund the budget, and then we have new revenue during the year that we use for the following year. Next year, there's a very small amount of the money that will come in during the year for school choice that will support next year's budget. And so, technically we have the 21,000. I think that puts us in a very, very precarious spot relative to, future years and future circumstances that we might need that money to help support. So if we had an extreme emergency of some sort, we wouldn't have school choice as a resource for us to help mitigate something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions before Doug goes on? Can I just ask one? I guess this probably is for you, Mike. Has that person been notified that their job is available?
Yep, and we've actually presented this slide or a version of this, I think an oral rendition of this slide. I don't know if we actually showed it or not. I can't remember, Doug. But last week at Pelham, this has already been shared with the staff.
Okay.
So it was sent to you, I think, a week ago, and part of the reason to send it out is we wanted to give the staff a heads up that there was a change, and there was lots of warm feelings about that position remaining in the budget because they know how important it is in the lives of kids to have that extra support for students, particularly as we look to next year. So they're aware of that. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, Doug, do you want to keep going?
So, as far as other things to share with you, I mean, that's the primary thing. I'm going to actually, pardon the scrolling here. I'm going to go back to a previous slide in the deck, I believe. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, so it'll be a little hard to read. This is a little busy, but this is kind of a snapshot of both the expenses here at the top that we're expecting to have, and then some of the funding sources at the bottom. And I'm sorry that it's difficult to show the whole thing. Let's see if I can get a view that's a little bit more visible to you. But the reason I show this is that it does show on this upper portion sort of what our expenses are. There's a number of things. If you look at this difference column or this change column, there's a lot of these expenses that aren't changing at all or very, very modestly. This 6,900 we've spoken about before is a shift of what was things we're purchasing through capital. We're moving them into the operating budget. That's an additional amount of tax support that the Finance Committee is going to support. They know that they're not going to spend capital in order to fund this equipment inside the regular operating budget. You see the sort of distribution of school amongst different accounts. Some of it's for classroom teachers, some of it's for some of the special education support, some of it's health insurance because that helps defray the costs there. 25,000 is the Rural REAP grant that is returning to help support some of our counseling services in the building. And then there's what I'll also point out is this 12,000 right here. That's the rental, that's in the bottom section there. I keep thinking that when I move my mouse on my screen, you'll see that, but you won't. Sorry. The rental fees are about 5 from the bottom there, and so there's a 12,000 number, and maybe I'll zoom in a bit more so we can show that a little bit better under the sources of revenue here. That one more zoom. So now I think you can kind of see that 12,000 showing right in that second column, and that's a new source of revenue for us, and hopefully that'll be something that we can potentially have year to year to help support our budget in the way it's going to be necessary for this coming year to help support our budget. So I think at that point, the overall budget is going to go up about 1.3% in the whole. We have strong tax support here from the community. This $46,000 of increase includes the 6,900. If you take that 6,900 out, the amount that is increasing is about 2.5%, which is typically what Pelham gives us guidance for an increase in the tax support from the community. But there's a little bit higher than that this year because of the switch from capital budget to operating budget for some Chromebook purchases. So that's a little bit of a difference there. So I think at this point I'll stop. I think I pointed out the things that are most interesting perhaps or different a little bit this year as far as sources of revenue, and see if there are any other questions that you might have relative to the budget.
Any questions for Doug? No, I don't see any hands. Okay. Thank you, Doug. Okay. All right. And so, Mike, you wanted to.
Yeah. So maybe not wonderful news at the end of this is that our understanding from a DESE conference call the other day that about the federal stimulus package that passed the House and the Senate in Washington, D.C. The concern I heard from DESE is that the distribution will be based on, and it's a lot of money, the distribution will be based on Title I funding. Pelham is not a Title I school, so DESE expressed some concern that some districts will get an awful lot of money, and then non-Title I schools under the federal formula will get absolutely nothing. So they said they're trying to work on some fix on that. So I will update you when I receive it. But, for folks who are seeing that and saying, oh, great, the schools will get a lot more funding right now. Non-Title I schools technically would not get anything. Hopefully there's some shifting in that. But I did want to communicate that because I'm getting a lot of questions about that federal stimulus package. I will try to answer if there's questions on that. I am not an expert yet. It's, I don't read the legislation. I just have other people describe what's in it to me.
Okay, well, we have some who are going to try to stump you. Let's go, Ron, and then Sarah Bess.
What is a Title I school?
Title I school is a school that has a certain percentage of low-income students in it. There was a year or two that Pelham did qualify. In a small school like Pelham, a couple students can swing that number considerably, but the last couple of years, Pelham has not been a Title I school. The student population has not met the qualification criteria.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Sarah Bess?
Same.
Oh.
Super
Margaret.
easy questions.
Margaret, did I see your hand up, or was that?
I had the same question. Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Well, good news, bad news situation then. Any other questions on the FY22 budget? Okay. Well, it being a budget vote, I will entertain a motion.
I think if someone wants to make a motion, it could be to vote on the Pelham FY22 budget as presented. The region has very specific language about the motions that one has to get. So if you've been on a region, that's like, Dr. Slaughter writes a very long paragraph on it. The municipal budget's a little bit easier.
I move that we accept the budget as presented.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. Brenda,
Brenda, I.
Sarah Bess,
Kenny, I.
Margaret,
Margaret, I.
Ron,
Ron, aye.
and Hall, aye. All right. Thanks, Doug, for all your work on this. I know that was not the only thing in your professional life, so appreciate the attention you paid to that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Doug. Have a good night.
All right. Good night.
Okay. Next up, in-person return update.
Sure. So I have some information I'd like to share. Some from Lee, just that Lee and Jess, the counselor, will be giving optional small group tours to students to preview the building during the last few weeks of March. And over the next several weeks, all classrooms are planning to lead reflective dialogue, help students generate questions or areas of concern, and engage students in the planning process, kind of like the hopes and dreams work for in-person learning, to make sure students are ready and acculturated who are returning. So speaking of that, Pelham, there's one or two students that we're looking for a little more clarity in their responses, but as it stands right now, 88% of Pelham students are returning to in-person learning on April 5th. As such, I know there was some conversation in a joint meeting about could Pelham upper grade students start at the same time, and some staff have asked that. I don't think that's going to be possible because some of the remote students would need to be transitioning at the same time as their Amherst counterparts, because there's some reshuffling that's going to happen. And, could we literally have students come in on April 5th, all 5th? I think we could. But, and I know some families would be really disappointed to hear this, but I do think it would be really disorienting for students who are choosing remote, and many of them choosing it for really good reasons. That's the family choice they made. They may have health conditions themselves or in their families, to have basically a week in limbo where there wouldn't really be a remote assignment for them yet, because the Amherst upper grades wouldn't have reorganized. So they sort of wouldn't have school for a week, and we can't do that, or, to put them in a remote classroom 5 days before the remote classroom ends, because the teacher in Amherst is going into person, right? And the classroom community is shifting. It just doesn't feel right. So I know that there's a strong interest. And I've heard that from Pelham families of everyone starting at once. But I do think, while it's a small number of remote families, it would really be, they're already, I'm already hearing concerns about, because anecdotally, right, Pelham is small, people chat, right? And people know that a lot of their friends, kids' friends are going in person. So one more disorienting experience is just one more than we should do, in my opinion, for families who have chosen the remote option. So, my recommendation is just stay with what we planned. It will involve a waiver from DESE, which I plan to fill out with the permission of this group. I technically don't need a school committee vote, which is why it's not on the agenda. Of course, I wouldn't have known that until they told us that a couple of days ago. So it would have been under 48 hours. But I don't, it doesn't. It seems like it needs to, be discussed, but not a vote of the school committee. I did have a conversation with someone at DESE, and they felt like this is when you're going from full remote to full in person with no hybrid, some acknowledgement that we would want to do it with a week gap of the younger kids coming in first seemed very reasonable to them. They didn't commit to approving a waiver they hadn't received, but this is the type of waiver that DESE seems to be amenable towards. But for the remote kids, it would be a really hard experience for 5 days, and it doesn't feel right to me. Because it would actually be a really awkward experience for that week plus the break week, and then they sort of, it would be a real jumble for them. So I'd like to go forward with the plan as voted by the school committee of the younger grades on the 5th and the intermediate grades on grades 3 to 6 on April 12th. Our building's ready to go. One of the things we were trying out, I think I mentioned some streaming capabilities. It wasn't great. It wasn't great in some ways because it really pushed on the bandwidth at Pelham School. As you may know, the internet at Pelham is not high speed in the way that you'd like it to be. But it also felt very awkward, talking to the IS director, worked for a teacher, and I want to thank Ms. Quinlan for being willing to come in and try it out. The technology is not great, right? And it would force a teacher to really stand in front of the room and do a lot of lecture. And that's not the way we teach elementary school students. And I don't think that's the way you all want. It's certainly not the way I want our elementary school students learning. So we did have a lot of concerns about it. We tried it out. It wasn't a hit, so to speak, for us. And so, I think that's sort of our update. In terms of bus, we will run 2 buses. They will both be far from full, but we will run 2 buses. And we're working now with this number on a transportation plan of drivers and how to orient that. So that'll come out over the next couple of weeks about how to do that. So that's, sorry, it's a little scattered, but that's sort of our update on in-person. I will say that 80% is higher than any of my other schools. So whether you think that's good or bad is up to you, but it is a notable thing that it's the vast majority of students in Pelham chose in person and are excited to come back in. So that's, I think, my update on in person, but I'm sure there's probably questions because this is no small deal.
Okay. Margaret, go ahead.
Can you reiterate what's happening to the other 12%? How are they going to be going to school?
Yep. So districts wide, so plural apostrophe at the end of the S, between the Amherst and Pelham districts. We will be working, we spent a lot of time today it looks like we'll have 2 classes at every grade level between the Amherst and Pelham schools, who are going to form new remote classrooms for students who chose remote. Everything else will stay the same in terms of the structure of the day, how much, like they're still using Google Classroom or Seesaw. All those features will remain the same. But with the majority of students in both districts returning to in-person, it looks like we're going to have almost a remote academy is a way to think about it, with 2 classes per grade level, K to 6.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And trying to keep the Pelham kids together, which is another thing I should mention, that, if there were 2 or 4 Pelham kids at a grade level, unless there was a reason that they didn't want to be together, which is possible, but our intention is to keep the Pelham students in one of those 2 classes at every grade level, so that they always have Pelham kids with them. If there was one student who chose remote, then that's obviously not possible, but when possible, to do that.
Other questions for Mike? Brenda?
Yes. So when we started to go into in-person education in October, there was an issue with the grades that 2nd grade was going to be with the kindergarten, 1st grade, and then they weren't because of a special ed teacher assignment. And I wonder if that's going to take place, this spring in April.
Yeah, it's a little easier this time because that one, the problem was that K and 1, right, there was idea to bring in 2 because our special education programming covers all 3 of those primary grades, and it wasn't perfect doing just K and 1, but it just didn't work out well. But now that we're doing K to 2 all together, this is actually what we sort of wanted to do originally, and there were reasons why we weren't able to pull it off that weren't about the special ed, but we're much happier to have that kind of early childhood team come in as a unit for the first week and then bring everybody back the following week. It's going to be a lot easier because what was happening when kids were in was some special education staff were seeing kids in person and then getting on their computer and seeing second grade students and then going back in person. And, I think during COVID times, focusing on the thing that's in front of you, whether it's a screen or whether it's kids, one thing is going to be much better for our staff.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. All right. Next up is future agenda planning. My gosh, I have not thought about the next meeting.
Well, I think we should probably do an update on how it's going being in person.
Well,
right?
yeah.
Assuming we're not meeting the first week in April, that would be something that we'd want to do. I think we'd want to do some work probably to prepare for town meeting. I guess the question is, does anyone know the date of town meeting?
Oh, I do.
It's the typical date, right? Like
Yeah.
early May, probably the first week or maybe they've changed it since the second week in May, something like that.
Right. It's not Pride Parade Day, but it is.
That's what was in my head. Yeah.
Here, I have it right here. It is annual town meeting, Saturday, May 8th.
Okay. Right. So we probably have one meeting before then. So maybe some preparation for town meeting. Might be on the agenda. And, I think probably getting a sense of school choice, like a more formal item since it's so critical for the operations. Those are the three things on my head in terms of putting on there. I don't know if there's other things that people want to share.
Just related to school choice, I think because it's such a focus, especially these days, it also seems like having a little better sense of like timeline. So just school choice for next year, but also school choice generally. Like, when do we do these things? I do sometimes get questions on like, where can I find a school choice application? That procedural stuff would be helpful. Ron, I saw your hand.
Sometime before the end of the year, I'd like us to discuss the sixth grade school choice students being automatically be able to go with their peers to the middle school again. I know that's an old topic and there are more pressing issues, but maybe we should revisit that before the end of the year.
Oh, the statutory interpretation question? Okay.
Yeah. Maybe Mr. Mignot, Ms. Hall, and I can have an offline conversation on that because I think I'd prefer to maybe start that way if we could. I'll make a note to try to set that up before we have a public conversation on the topic. I might be able to resolve some of your concerns, Mr. Mignot, if we were able to talk offline.
Okay. Brenda.
I guess I'll just bring this up just because I've been getting a few questions from families about the potential of aftercare programming happening in the fall. And I thought I brought it up. It's also, small potatoes comparatively to what we're dealing with. But for next fall, some of the prospective school choice families, that's important to them. And with talking about the budget and about considering to continue renting out the gym, how might that impact that? I don't know if it's a school board issue, but I thought I would just raise it since it's in some parents' minds.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we can have a topic just starting to have, even if the topic is itemizing fall discussions that we should be having before fall, because I think that's one. I bet this group could come up with other things. So it might be, I don't know how the group feels, but just having sort of an open-ended conversation about fall and what that might look like. And I think that's a really good point, Brenda. And I imagine there's other topics that people are on people's minds about what fall might look like.
Great. Yeah, Sarah Beth.
And along those same lines, since we're switching the times, if there will be before school or what that will look like. And then, I don't know, it was brought up, in the public comment talking about preschool for next year, if there's going to be, I wouldn't be surprised if Jesse says everything has to be in person in the fall. If have it right, like given how the last 3 days have been with Jesse, that if they're already going to be, all of the kids in the building, do we want to talk about the preschool again, especially given the public comment we received today? I don't know if it's too late or like it already happened and we're all done, but
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Well, you know where to find me if you think of another agenda idea. All right. Next up, warrant report. I have 2 tonight. I authorized by my signature to payables in the amount of $40,775,000.67 for the warrant dated March 3rd, 2021. This was all general fund expenses, and I signed that on March 9th. And I authorized by my signature to payroll in the amount of $57,638.98. That was for a warrant dated March 10th, 2021, and I signed it also on March 10th. Those are all my warrants tonight. No gifts to accept. So I will take a motion to adjourn. Or I'll just move to adjourn. I move that we adjourn the Pelham School Committee meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh,
Go ahead.
now everybody wants in.
Brenda seconded.
Okay. All right. There's no discussion, so we'll do a roll call vote. Brenda.
Brenda, aye.
Sarah Best.
Kenny, aye.
Margaret.
Margaret, I.
Ron.
Ron, aye.
And Hall, aye. We are adjourned. All right.
See you around.
Thank you.
Good night.
Take care.